And we are live. It says it right there. It says you are live. Yay. Okay. Welcome to the Blathering Boomer, episode number 11, pre-vice presidential debate special. And I have a very special guest with me, Prince. And we're going to be talking about a lot of things. But I want to start out with something that is dear to many of our hearts. And I'm going to let this just kind of play and we'll talk about it after. And here we go.
This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days, and most alarmingly, into the bodies of their children. And it's no coincidence that Americans die earlier than Canadians or Germans or Italians or Japanese or Koreans or Australians or most any other comparable country. And it wasn't always that way until the early 1990s. Our life expectancy was the same or better than other developed countries. Then suddenly, more and more Americans began suffering from chronic diseases, from obesity, cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Our maternal mortality rate soared to the highest of any developed country on earth. Same with infant mortality. Like the frog in the slowly boiling water, we didn't really notice as we got sicker and sicker. We've grown now to accept chronic disease conditions as normal. But now in 2024, we're finally waking up to this cataclysm and we're asking ourselves, how in the world did this happen? A big part of it is our diet. Restaurants that serve contaminated food are fined or shut down. But when it's the government that approves the poisons in our food, a few people get very, very rich and the toxins end up in every supermarket aisle. Let me show you what I mean. Doritos, Cheez-Its, Cap'n Crunch, gummy bears. Everyone knows that these are junk foods, so maybe you wouldn't be too surprised to see that the ingredients include a lot of poisons, including a harmful yellow dye called tatrazine, or yellow dye number 5. What you may not know is that this dye was originally made out of the sludge that's left over when you turn coal into coke or blast furnaces. It's called coal tar, and I've actually sued many big industries for legacy contamination of coal tar all around the country because it's so toxic and it's so harmful to the environment and human beings. A century ago, it was just an obnoxious industrial byproduct that everybody was trying to figure out ways to get rid of. One of the ways that they did that was by paving roads. But then a British chemist figured out that the coal tar could be used to derive fabric dye. And if fabric dye, why not food? Food manufacturers began using it to cover up the discoloration of low quality foods that they wanted to pass off on unsuspecting customers. They didn't know back then that this yellow dye, tartrazine, causes tumors, asthma, developmental delays, neurological damage, ADD, ADHD, hormone disruption, gene damage, anxiety, depression, intestinal injuries. Well, we know it now. We've known this for decades. That's why tartrazine is heavily restricted in other countries. In some countries, foods with tartrazine have a warning label that it may cause ADHD in children. Today, it's made from petroleum, not coal tar. Either way, it's crazy to add this to your kids' favorite foods. It doesn't even change the flavor. This yellow dye isn't just a junk food. It's in the foods that we consider healthy. It's in the everyday kids' snacks like popcorn, mac and cheese, fruit snacks. It's in sports drinks like Gatorade and so-called vitamin water. It's even added to chicken broth, to corn, to pickles, to mustard, and to yogurt. And so, of course, our kids get sick. And we lovingly feed them chewable vitamins, which have, surprise, tartrazine. And so the cycle continues until the coughs and asthma kick in, at which point you go to pick up some cough syrup. And yeah, you guessed it, tartrazine. I've been picking on tartrazine today, but that's just one of at least 100 chemical poisons that our health agencies allow into our children's food. I can make a video just like this to talk about Red 40, BHA, BHD, potassium bromate, chemical after chemical, and on and on and on. If just one of them can cause all of these problems, imagine what they're doing in combination. That has never been studied. If we took all of these chemicals out, our nation would get healthier immediately. We'd have fewer sick days. We'd have better focus. We'd have less anxiety. Our kids would learn more easily. We'd lose weight. We'd have more energy. We'd have fewer tumors and longer lives. It's not all dark. Over the past 16 years, the government has banned 8 chemical additives that cause cancer, genetic damage, asthma, and many of the other self conditions as tartrazine does. And you know what's interesting? All 8 of those crucial steps forward in our kids' health were taken under President Trump. But the Democrats who claim to be all about healthcare have stood by watching other countries ban these poisons and make our kids sick, asthmatic, hyperactive, and depressed. They left them on every supermarket shelf in America. They even used your tax money to put them in your kids' school lunch. So their big food and their big ag donors probably gave them all that golden handshake and the big money hug. And their big pharma donors probably called them up and thanked them also because now they're going to make billions selling Adderall, Prozac, and rescue inhalers. Enough is enough. President Trump and I are going to stop the mass poisoning of American children. Together, we're going to make America healthy again.
So, I know that was a little bit lengthy, but has his voice gotten a little better, or am I just used to it?
It has. It has improved. He's been undergoing treatment, and so I think it has gotten better over the past year and a half.
I gotta tell you though, Prince, I'm bummed about mac and cheese, and I'm really bummed about Captain Crunch.
Yeah.
Would do.
Well, Mountain Dew is another big one.
Oh God, that's ironic because I've often said that Mountain Dew is the best thing for highways since asphalt, and I guess maybe it actually has asphalt in it. Little did I know how prophetic I was being.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, going back to the '90s, people would joke about how Mountain Dew might sterilize you because of Yellow 5. But like Bobby said, we have come to accept this instead of being like, wait, why?
Wow. Well, if I give up Captain Crunch and gummies and mac and cheese is going to be a tough one, popcorn, all those things, I think I still got, if I'm driving more than 100 miles from home, I got to have some Diet Mountain Dew. I'll take my chances. Plus, I already have 6 grandkids, so I don't think sterilization is going to be a huge issue for me. So
yeah, well, hopefully that's the only impact for you. But you know, for a lot of kids, like Bobby was saying, there's a lot of other aspects.
Yeah,
mac and cheese, as long as you source good ingredients and don't go for just what's in the box, you should be okay. But that's the difficulty, is it's hard to get good food these days.
Yeah, especially for a lazy person.
With Monsanto being deep into almost every crop we have, even if you're trying to eat healthy, it's hard to get non-GMO, non-pesticide and non-chemically induced, just basic crops. And that's where it gets really, really tough, unfortunately.
So Bobby's been, they've come at him every 6 ways till Sunday, as they say. But I, for one, think he's being extremely sincere. I respect MAHA. I have never been MAGA, but I've made no secret that I support this coalition of MAHA, MAGA, and Aloha. And I think I couldn't do any better for somebody to represent MAHA on this podcast than you. You've got some history with MAHA and history of the Democratic Party. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a few things that you'd like to say, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So I'm Prince. I'm a friend of the Blathering Boomer. We met many years ago on the Tulsi Trail. I was Tulsi's New York State Director back then. More recently, I was RFK Jr.'s New York State Director, as well as other roles with the campaign. I'm a recovering Democrat. For years, I spent drinking the Kool-Aid as part of that cult, I guess, to be polite. Campaigning for Obama, campaigning for Howard Dean, campaigning for Kerry, and then many other local people. Now I regret all of it, but hindsight's 2020. Now that Bobby's campaign has wrapped up, I and a number of other ex-Kennedy staffers, we've started what's known as the MAHA PAC, Make America Healthy Again PAC. It is not associated with any candidate per FEC rules. But we are a bunch of people with experience from the campaign and other campaigns and the health freedom movement who've gotten together trying to push this message for this campaign and beyond. If you want to check us out, we're at MAHA, www.maha.vote. So check us out there. We've also had articles in the Washington Post, the Federalist, the Atlantic, and many other places. So, we just got started, but we're making the rounds and we're getting out there. There are other MAHA groups out there. You may hear about the MAHA Alliance or some others. Hopefully we all can just work together and push, forward this message that we need to stop allowing government and big business turn our bodies into profit centers. Now we're at the point where so many people are obese from eating terrible food, and then they ship us over to big pharma for Ozempic and other things to deal with those problems. And it's just this continuous cycle where we're running down our bodies for this concept of faux profit. RFK Sr. gave a famous speech many, many years ago about GNP and about how our gross national product measures the value of our missiles and our tanks and our airplanes, but it doesn't measure the quality of our children's education or the joy of their play or other things that should be far more valuable than just profit. Things like our health. You have people like Steve Jobs dying in his 50s despite being a billionaire. If you don't have your health, you really have nothing. And we've taken it for granted for too long. And like the video said, we've been conditioned that all of these terrible things that happen to us that we experience now that we wouldn't have experienced 100 years ago are normal. And we need to break out of that mindset that it's been normalized because it can be broken. You go to Europe, I know a number of people here that can't eat pasta. They have celiac, they get terrible cramps and other digestive issues, but they go to Italy and they can down a thing of pasta, no problem. Is it the gluten or is it the glyphosate? And that's really the question we should be asking. And unfortunately, we have so many people, specifically in the Democratic Party, who are so focused on protecting big business, protecting corporate profits, protecting big pharma, instead of asking the questions like they would have 60 years ago of what's in the best interest of the people and the voters and the masses. Now they're part of the elites. And to put that into perspective, Rob Schneider recently says this past weekend at Save the Republic rally or Rescue the Republic rally, 70% of the country's wealth are held by Democrats. 25 years ago, people would joke about the rich being rich falling into line with the Republican Party. Now they've become the base of the Democratic Party, and they're doing everything they can to make them wealthier so they can keep donating back to the party. If you look at a lot of the policies we've seen in the past 3.5 years, it's been mandates and giveaways to help donors such as solar panel makers and electric vehicle mandates, so that the money keeps rolling back into the party for these giveaway of taxpayer dollars. And one last point, to kind of nail, hammer home this this corruption. A couple years ago, in one of the multi-trillion-dollar giveaways that was passed under Biden, there was a $7,000 tax credit for electric vehicles. The day after Biden signed that, all the electric vehicle manufacturers raised their prices by $7,000. And so taxpayers saved nothing. What they did was they transferred $7,000 of per vehicle of taxpayer dollar to pretty much be pure profit for these auto manufacturers, who in turn would then donate back to the Democratic Party as a thank you for bribes with taxpayer dollars. So our country is ripe with corruption, as Bobby would call it. It's called corporate capture, when corporations have captured government agencies that are supposed to regulate them and now control them. And that's what we're trying to break with the Make America Healthy Again movement.
The $7,000 tax credit causing the $7,000 rise in price sounds a lot like what they were talking about with I don't know her name, how to say her first name, so I'll just say Harris, because there's all this racism involved if you say her name wrong. And I don't want to say her name wrong and get called a racist. So Ms. Harris, them Harris, whatever, want to do this $25,000 tax credit thing for first-time home buyers, and the immediate response was that's just going to raise the price of housing by $25,000. So the $7,000 tax credit or rebate, whatever it was. And by the way, I drive an electric vehicle. Where's my $7,000? Well, maybe mine doesn't count. Mine's I have a plug-in hybrid. I guess I have to be like real electricity and like pure electricity. Anyway, I still want my $7,000. I haven't gotten it, but
the best way to get it is buy stock in those auto companies that raise their prices, and those dividends and those profits. That's how you get them now. Is you have to be part of the corporate class to get those benefits.
I'll keep that in mind if I have investable cash again. But
yeah,
we're going to move on to the vice presidential debate pretty soon, because that's why we got those bastards scheduled the vice presidential debate in my time slot. I mean, the brazen audacity of them.
How dare they?
We're on an hour early, and I appreciate you coming on with me in an unusual 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock Brooklyn time, 5 o'clock woke Hollywood time, as opposed to our normal 1 hour later time slot. And we're going to wrap up before my usual time slot, because we both want to watch that debate. But I want to dwell on MAHA just for another moment before we get on to the vice presidential thing. This coalition, which wasn't planned, this kind of evolved organically, started with Trump, but now the addition of people like Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., this is more than just this is not just about Trump anymore. And there were so many people who, in all my I'm not voting for Biden, or I'm not voting for Harris criticism of me, they kind of softened a little bit when I said that I actually plan to vote for RFK Jr. Well, now RFK Jr. is part of the coalition. But there was a lot of talk on Twitter, and I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago very, very extensively. There are a lot of RFK supporters in swing states that aren't quite on board yet and still want to vote for RFK. And one of the big issues I have is the voter shaming. MAGA people need to stop doing that. If you knew anything about independents, which a lot of you are, you don't tell an independent what to do. You never say, you gotta, followed by the words, vote for. You let independents who are thinkers look at the issues and think. So, while I disagree, I'm hoping, disagree/hope that these RFK supporters will come around and vote for the coalition. Bullying them is not the way to do it. So do you have anything to say to people who are from your MAHA movement who still are not quite on board with the coalition, especially in swing states?
So, well, first thing is, I haven't seen the bullying from the right, and maybe that's an East Coast versus West Coast thing. I have seen a lot of it from the left, and in fact, just a couple of days ago, I had there's someone I knew from the Bernie days who was trying to bully me, and it was interesting because I've seen this approach happen a number of times where first they try to say, look at all these sources that say Trump's terrible and Harris is great, and then they try to push the idea of, do you think you're smarter than all these sources? Fall in line, you sheep, and stop thinking that you can think. And that's generally what I've seen from the left. I've not seen it from the right. The right, I've seen, generally just be more open. And it's like, if you want to join us, great. If not, we'll still accept you. And we've seen that throughout RFK's campaign. In fact, going back to January when we're trying to just kicking off getting signatures to get Bobby on the ballot, sometimes the best people who were helping us were people who supported Trump. Meanwhile, you had weaponized lawfare from the Democrats trying to keep Bobby and Jill Stein and Dr. West and various other people off the ballot because the Democrats seem to believe in a North Korean style single party election type of situation. And we just saw how
where we're heading if this keeps going.
Yeah, well, we just saw how they dealt with their primary, 14 million plus votes for Joe Biden, but he's out and someone who got 0 votes Kamala Harris is suddenly the nominee, and no one's batting an eye. One of the things they say is you can tell a person by the company they keep. And people that are now lining up behind the left are people that used to be considered evil. The Cheney, you buy the left. Cheney, the Roves, the Bushes, etc., are all people that the left used to demonize, going back 20 plus years. And now they're cheering about how these neocons and warmongers are finding a comfortable and happy home in the Democratic Party. On the flip side, people that the Democrats used to love, like RFK Jr., who 25 years ago was on magazines calling him the Kennedy that mattered for saving the environment, for trying to save the environment and clean up the Hudson, or Tulsi, who was a rising star and vice chair of the Democratic Party, or Elon, who revolutionized electric vehicles and was an environmental hero. All these, Rob Schneider, a famous comedian that people loved his movies. All these people that the left used to love are now lining up behind Trump. And so it's interesting, if you think about the company, who would you rather be associated with? People who love war and destruction, like Dick Cheney and, the various people from Bush's administration, etc., or the people who are trying to make us healthy, trying to clean up the environment, trying to bring peace, like Bobby and Tulsi and now, I guess, President Trump.
It really has flipped on its head.
It really has.
Most of my life, the Republicans were the rich party of the rich, the party of the elite, and the Democrats were the working class, scrappy, civil liberties, free speech advocates. This is a perfect example of power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The
desire for power is what it really came down to. I've been an active member of the party for years. And I was, at one point, I was vice chair of the Young Dems in my state, and I was president of a local Democrat club for a while. And about 20 years ago, during after the 2004 election, the Dems really just got desperate for power. And it seems like they took all the worst parts of the Republicans from the 80s and 90s, and then some of the other bad parts of the Democrats, and merged it all together into kind of this cult-like group that's now the Democratic Party. And it's interesting you brought up free speech, and because people talk about civil rights and rights being under attack. One right that's never been considered even remotely touchable has been the First Amendment, the right to assemble, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion. The First Amendment was always seen as a given. And the fact that we now have a party that's openly attacking it and talking about trying to amend it or remove it, etc., is shocking. There's a reason why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. They could have ordered the amendments any way they wanted, but the fact that they made the First Amendment, the right to free speech, the First Amendment, shows you how important that they considered it and prioritized it. And now you have people openly challenging the entire concept. John Kerry said today or yesterday that it would be a goal of the Democrats to change the First Amendment if they win an election. Tim Walz and Harris are on record talking about how the First Amendment doesn't grant you absolute free speech, which it does actually, outside of yelling fire in the theater. And Harris talks about being a gift, not a right, when in fact it is a right. And the First Amendment is a very unique thing to the U.S. that many countries don't even have, like the UK or Canada. And that is part of what keeps our freedom much more stable than even other countries.
I dare say that, and thanks for sending me that John Kerry thing. That was actually my quintessential best moment as my own engineer, that I had that thing ready to show while you were talking about John Kerry and the First Amendment thing. But enough patting myself on the back. I dare say that, and I said it last week, the Democrats have not had a valid, real, maybe valid is the wrong word, a real primary since 2008. 2008, Obama, it was Obama versus Hillary. Obama won. I was definitely seduced by his hope and change thing, but that's a whole separate conversation. 2012, he was the incumbent, seemingly successful presidency. He wasn't going to be challenged. 2016, well, we know what 2016 was.
Yeah.
That was the whole Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz debacle. 2020, they somehow everybody who was a serious candidate dropped out on the same day, and the fifth place non-serious candidate got installed. And 2024, as you just said, 14 million votes to 0, and the person with 0 is the nominee somehow. I have a real problem with the process. It goes beyond, yes, personalities, sure. This Harris person is an absolute nightmare. But my bigger problem is it's the process. There should be, if somebody's going to run as the banner person for the Democrat Party, that person has to have the support of the rank and file Democrats, not somebody who left the primary disgracefully before Iowa in 2019 and didn't get a single vote this year. So we can go on and on about it. But going back to 2008, I was
one quick thing on that.
Sure.
And where it shows you is the Democrats. For one, I would say I think the last real primary Democrats had was actually 2004. In 2008, they tried to clear the field for Hillary. They failed because Obama had more strength than they expected, but they were trying to create cleared field in 2008, which is unusual for an open election.
Right. Well, tried and failed, I'll put under the category of a successful primary, though. But yeah.
Sure.
But I know what you're saying.
I give the attempt that cheating makes it automatically, suspect. But more importantly, the biggest issue that we're seeing is that it shows the Democrats don't trust voters. And this is something that started popping up in the 2000s, especially after the Bush loss in 2004, was there was this mindset in the Democratic Party that voters were too stupid, and I quote the party, to vote in their own best interest, and they needed Democratic elites to make choices for them. And that seems to have gone from like a coffee...
Super delegates.
Well, yeah. But, that mindset seems to have gone from like a water cooler conversation to actually a philosophy they seem to be embracing. They seem to want to go back to the period of party bosses, the super delegates, as you mentioned, making the decisions because they think the rest of us are too stupid to actually make an appropriate decision. This goes back to the censorship, going back to that. They think we're too stupid to be able to deal with free speech and information, and therefore everything should be controlled by them so we can be well propagandized and to be nice and little cult members.
Right. They want their Nurse Ratched, and we're the inmates in the day room having to take our saltpeter and just behave ourselves. It doesn't work. And people, and you and I are great examples of that. You were a very, very, you were, I mean, your life, you were the president of a local Democrat chapter. I supported the Democrats for years, but I had nothing to lose. But you actually gave up a position in the Democrat Party when you saw what was really happening. It's one of the great frustrations of my life right now, because I've surrounded myself with good people most of my life, and these good people I was hoping that one by one they would wake up as opposed to being woke, but they haven't awakened. They've gone woke. It's really scary. I feel like I'm in the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where one by one the seed pods are coming and nobody's acting the way they used to. It's very frustrating. And yes, I completely agree. Voter shaming, which I personally experienced heavily and do to this day, comes from the left. And I will say I haven't seen directly any voter shaming towards MAHA people coming from the right. What I've heard is a lot of complaining about it. So I have secondhand regarding that, not firsthand information. I want to make that clear.
So,
but
I do want to throw one point in there about and then we want to jump over to the VP debate. But what's interesting, and this is when I started losing my faith in the Democrat Party, was in 2016 they started just beating down voters. Shame and guilting was actually a key aspect of Hillary's campaign. And there was one famous speech she gave in Brooklyn where they were trying to gender shame men to vote for Hillary and slut shame women into voting for Hillary. You had Gloria Steinem and Madeleine Albright and Hillary out there cheering and laughing as they were talking about how, if you're a man and you don't support Hillary, you're sexist. If you're a woman, there's a special place in hell for women that don't support women. And if you're a woman who supports Bernie, it's only to meet boys, to get laid. And it was really kind of disgusting stuff. And then it got worse where they were essentially telling, perfectly happy people, especially women, you may think you're good, but you're not. Just beating people down into being victims so that essentially they'll accept anything. And right now what you have is a whole group of people that will accept a gentle lie or a pleasant lie over a hard truth. Right now, people are suffering. Things are hard for a lot of people. Inflation's had a big impact. And we've seen it, where the inflation comes from. It's from these giveaway projects where Democrats are giving money to their donors so they can get money back through donations, like the car inflation, the $7,000 tax credit. But people don't want to hear it. I'm sure you've seen this in your personal life. I've seen this in my personal life where you may have a solution for someone's problem, but they just want to hear, no, everything's fine or everything's okay. And that's sadly, I think, how people are still falling for the trick that we're seeing. It is, you have this brat summer and, this faux joy campaign being run by Harris and Walz, but it's all an illusion. But there are people who want that illusion. It's, if you ever read Brave New World, you have that whole thing about Soma and how they constantly keep people drugged up to keep them in control and thinking that they're happy with their lives, even though they're effectively slaves. And that's what you have, is you have people who are being mind controlled and manipulated, and they're thinking, oh, I'm a victim. Oh my God, the world's going to end. Oh, the Democrats are here to save me. Let me get back to my boozy brunch.
Right. And that Soma reference you made, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Norma Ray.
No.
Oh, she's a union rabble rouser in the Deep South. Anyway, her husband is is a factory worker, and the union organizer comes to their house, and they're talking about just how they don't have a great life. But the husband says, well, you know what? When I don't like what's happening, I just drink a beer. So it's kind of the same thing as the Soma in Brave New World. We're 28 minutes away from the debate. So I want to touch briefly on the 2008 election, because people think the vice president doesn't matter, and it does. 2008, like I just said, I was seduced by Obama's silver tongue. I really believed in hope and change. I'd had enough of the Republicans at that point. I really wanted them to win. But I had a lot of respect for John McCain. I mean, as legend has it, he was in the Hanoi Hilton, this horrible, horrible POW camp. And he was, again, as legend has it, I don't have proof of this, but they said he can go. They were releasing him, and he wouldn't leave without his men. And if that's true, that's just off the charts respect. So I had to consider John McCain, but then he made his vice presidential pick, and it was Sarah Palin. And I was terrified of the possibility, and McCain was an old guy, and he did die at some point, but he was an old guy, and the whole, besides everything about Obama, they would show Sarah Palin and say she's just a heartbeat away from the presidency. And she was talking about shooting mooses from helicopters and couldn't answer what publications she reads. I mean, she was an absolute horror show of a candidate, not helped by mainstream media. Looking back, mainstream media was pretty unkind to her as well, but certainly it was effective for me. I thought that the possibility that Sarah Palin could one day be president by itself was enough for me to vote for Barack Obama. Cut ahead to now, and we have a vice presidential candidate on the debate side. Well, backing up a little bit, actually, it's been a running joke for these last 4 years when they talked about how Biden's got to go, but he's got a poison pill, because if he goes, we go from the frying pan to the fire, because his vice president, whatever her name is worse than him. All of a sudden she became joy and peace and love or whatever when she somehow successfully got that coup with her and Nancy Pelosi, whatever happened backstage there. Biden wasn't happy, but he's out. She's in. And now she's done something absolutely miraculous. I have to give credit where credit is due. She did what I thought would be absolutely impossible. She actually managed to find someone worse than her as a running mate. So let's meet Tim Walz. And oh boy, here we go.
The duo are holding debate camp in the northern peninsula of Michigan. CBS News will host the showdown on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. in New York City. The last 90 minutes, no audience in the studio, will be moderated by Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Why do you need two moderators? Why do you need these two moderators? By the way, these two people are like Kamala sycophants. So I don't know. It's going to be another 3-on-1 operation, but I think that I have high hopes for JD Vance, man. JD Vance is really, really smart cookie. And there have been some pretty shocking things that can be talked about in tonight's debate. Like, for instance, Tim Walz, are you a communist Chinese asset run by the Communist Chinese Party? Now, let me begin by saying, do you have a favorite vacation spot? Is there a place that you really like? And there are places like my wife and I really like to go. We've been there. We're in our mid-30s, okay? So we've been to our favorite vacation spots like 1 or 2 times. All right? If they're like an exotic spot that's not around the corner from you. Like you can drive to the beach here in Florida. But if you want to go like on vacation, like to like a big, like to a exotic location for a vacation, and you're both public servant, if you're both like on teachers' salaries, that exotic vacation better be like the pontoon boat ramp at your local lake. Tim Walz, for some reason, has traveled to China 30 times. What the hell is that about? How is Tim Walz, on a public school teacher salary, able to afford to go to China 30 times, including but not limited to getting married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square and then honeymooning in China? You know, Tim Walz had like a security clearance in China. Did you know this? How do you go to someplace 30 times? You have never been to any place 30 times for a vacation. Nobody has. There's something far darker and something far more nefarious going on here. And that might be the reason why Kamala Harris, in part, that and like rampant anti-Semitism, didn't choose Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania.
So that was a little intro to Mr. Walz. I can't vouch for the veracity of what Benny Johnson's saying there, but I've heard 15, I've heard 30, but I don't think I've been back to New York 15 times since I moved out west. Talk about favorite vacation spots. So is there fire? Who knows? I'm very careful to try to be truthful and talk about what I know versus what I hear. But that's what I hear. By the way, there's only 6 people watching now, and that's fine. I appreciate all 6 of you. It's been commented to me before that people can't comment. I guess if you're watching on Twitter and not on YouTube, you can't comment on the live stream. So I'm keeping my Twitter open on the side over there. If you have anything you want to add to this discussion, go ahead and hit me up with a DM on Twitter at UNG. That's Utterly Nasty Guy 714, UNG 714. And I will certainly respond to your comment. But anyway, there's going to be a my point being, the vice president matters. It does matter because the vice president, it's happened many times in our history that the vice president has become president in less than 4 years. It's happened in my lifetime twice, actually, that I could think of. It happened with Nixon. It happened with JFK. I think that's it. But still, that's twice in one lifetime there. So there's a real possibility that this guy could be president if his running mate's elected, whatever her name is. So do you have any? We only have about 20 minutes left, but if you want to, if you have any comments at this point, we could do that. Otherwise, I can move on to the next screen.
Yeah, well, I would say if you have it up, you should play that one. You know, so Walz's personal life aside, and I do think there are some suspicious ties to the China thing, and the way that seems to be the only country he visits, and he visits frequently and for long periods of time. You know, I understand being a fan, but considering our situation with them and his close ties and really his adulation for the CCP specifically, as well as China, is a little concerning. You see this kind of throughout the Democratic Party. Going back to '94, you had the Chinese money laundering scandal where 96, China was pumping money into the DNC to help fund Clinton's reelection. We recently saw Gavin Newsom, clean up San Francisco finally because Xi Jinping was visiting. And the moment Xi Jinping left, as soon as his boss left, it went back to kind of being crappy again.
Where did they go? What did he do with them? Where did they go? I've always wondered about this. They went somewhere.
Clearly they had the power to clean it up. They just have no desire to until their boss visits.
Right.
And so the ties between, and then you have Nancy Pelosi, her son, who's a lobbyist for China and Taiwan. Same thing with Hunter. He's collecting money from Taiwan for the big guy. So there's a lot of connections between the Democratic Party and China that definitely raise, smoke. We don't have enough to know if there's fire, but definitely red flags that should be concerning. But definitely that aside, there's many of other issues with Walz. His governorship has been kind of weird. It's funny how he likes to use the word weird, but weird and kind of atrocious the way he let his city burn to the ground for political purposes. His attack on free speech is particularly concerning and worrisome. And then, we have that part where, he seemed like he was pulling his son, being a little abusive to his son on stage at the DNC. The way he was leaking information to his daughter to get out on Twitter about National Guard movement during the Floyd riots. The way his wife would bask about how, about being able to smell the city burn as if it was a good thing. There's something very odd and off about a public servant who likes this, who gets a thrill out of destruction and chaos, when in fact your entire job is supposed to be peace and productivity for the people you're protecting. The only reason you want destruction and chaos is if you're serving someone else or you're kind of messed up.
Well, here's Tim Walz's wife on that very topic.
I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
So that kind of corroborates what you just said about the daughter and the guard. And
you should
be
looking forward to the smell of burning tires and burning buildings. You should be stopping it as governor.
Hello. now you're guilty of being logical. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, but instead, you have these people trying to, almost relive a hippie type of movement because they feel empty inside and they think this is their chance to feel like radicals, when in fact they're just causing unnecessary destruction. And that's one of the things you kind of see over and over again is this almost rebel without a cause. These people looking for something to be angry about and rebellious about, and they almost make it up themselves.
Well, Tim Walz's wife is a very, very calm woman. Let's see her talking right now.
Losing it. Let's check in with Gwen Walz, the wife of Kamala Harris's VP pick, Tim Walz. She seems nice and not at all deranged.
You just show me this. Turn the page, right? Turn the page. And you know what else that looks like? Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Donald Trump. We are turning the page. 52 days and we are turning the page. 52 days and it is bye-bye, Donald Trump.
There's something weird about how the left likes to talk to their supporters like 6-year-olds all the time. You see that with Harris a lot. You see it from Jill Biden. You see it from Walz. I don't know if it's a reflection of the type of mindset that you have to be in order to vote Democrat, but they're constantly talking to their supporters like they're 6 years old, and that's kind of interesting.
It's interesting is certainly one way of putting it. And we've had Jackie Kennedy, Dolly Madison, Bess Truman, even Laura Bush. Hey, I dare say Melania Trump, and many others. The first lady has always been Eleanor Roosevelt, Rosalind Carter. The list goes on and on. Can you imagine if this happens and somehow her husband becomes president and that thing is the first lady? Heaven help us. Heaven help us. It's scary. So again, for part of the same reason that I heavily supported Obama in 2008, I think that these people have got to be stopped. I honestly, I know I've heard this hyperbole over so many elections during my life, and I'll age myself. My first vote was from a governor in 72. So I've been through many presidential elections, and almost every one of them say this is the most important election of our lifetime. This is the first time I'm saying it. Hey, my cousin Lisa's watching. Hey there, Lisa. No, you're not late. We're here, and you can always watch. You can always go to YouTube and watch it later. We have 10 people watching now. But we'll get another couple of dozen after the whole thing's over. So anyway, we've seen his wife, but let's.
So yeah, she would make for an odd second lady, but hopefully the voters choose better. The more important thing is where he would be as vice president or, God forbid, president.
I meant to show this little thing after I did the Tim Walz thing and before I did his wife, but this was to be my segue.
He has a wife,
Anyway.
Yeah, Tim Walz.
So
it's a great movie. That's Life of Brian, for those of you who don't know.
We got to her before we got to him. But let's do a little bit of him right now. And let's hear Mr. Walz's very own words right now.
Freedom. Because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
Well, I fear that kind of flies in the face of something he did as governor. And that is this.
Hello, you have reached the Department of Public Safety stay-at-home hotline. The information you leave is considered public information. At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated. Thank you.
That was real.
Yeah.
Like, that was actually real, where there was this government hotline. I'm not over it. I'm not over the COVID thing. I'm not over the fact that the government grounded all of us, basically, as adults, made us stay home, and we had to just sit there and take it, regardless of you have had your business shut down or your loved one was going to die alone. There's been no accountability or even, so not for any of this. And it's, how are we not terrified that this could happen again?
I don't want to cut Cat Tim short, but we're getting close to debate time. Yep. So,
but that's absolutely right. Like, it's about control. It's all about just control.
And how does that fit with mind your own damn business? How does the same guy who says mind your own damn business create a hotline to rat people out for violating a nonsensical mask mandate?
It's gaslighting. It's pure simple gaslighting. What's interesting is the places where you see something like that are totalitarian regimes. Places like Stalin's Soviet Union, where people would rat out their neighbors if they didn't seem loyal enough, or other totalitarian regimes. That's the philosophy is, you have love and tolerance as long as you fall in line, in the narrow tent, narrow view of what the left believes. Otherwise, as Hillary constantly emphasizes and other people on the left seem to be support, that's education camps for you until you do fall in line and believe the narrow doctrine that they want you to believe. Very much like 1984. This is what they want. It's total control, and
you remember
they get by with this with the gaslighting.
When Winston Smith's about to be tortured by O'Brien, he's in the waiting room to be tortured, and he meets one of his compadres who was ratted out by his children. His children busted him for thought crime. This was, if you watch the movie Swing Kids, and I know these are both works of fiction, but it's also pretty real. In the movie Swing Kids, again, the Hitler Youth was told to rat out, if you heard anything against the Fuhrer in your house, report it. And you had kids reporting their parents. The Gestapo would come to the door, and the parents would just look at the child with this look of disbelief on their face, realizing that the child had repeated their words to the Gestapo. It's awful. It's if we the First Amendment. Go ahead.
And these re-education camps are real. I mean, China, they put the last emperor, I think Pei was his name. The last emperor of China had to go through one of these re-education camps once the communists took over China. This is a guy who, many decades earlier was seen as almost a godlike figure amongst the Chinese people. Became a common worker, thoroughly re-educated as a good loyal communist. And according to the left, that's perfectly acceptable now, because if you are one step out of line, even if a toe gets out of line of what they consider right, well, they got to re-educate you to make sure you fall back in line, because how dare you have differing thoughts from their view of what's acceptable.
It's all true. And it's why I thought it was hyperbole in every election until this one. Now I think it's very real. This is absolutely the most important election of my lifetime, maybe the most important election in the history of this country. My decades-long people in my circle, my family, people I'm close to, people I love, people who love me, think I'm absolutely nuts for supporting the coalition. But luckily, at least half the country seems to be with it. Again, my big hope is that one by one, people aren't woke, that people become awake. Awake and woke are not the same thing.
So what do you think will happen tonight in just a few minutes?
Oh boy. I mean, I think and hope that J.D. Vance absolutely wipes the floor with the stolen valor guy. We haven't gotten into the stolen valor thing. The guy did not carry weapons of war into Afghanistan. He lies repeatedly. He lied about his drunk driving thing to be elected to Congress. And then he has this, there's a wonderful word they use. I remember in 2016 when Hillary was running for president, and they called her out on that Bosnian sniper fire thing. Remember, we arrived in Bosnia, dug for cover. And they basically showed her the video right in front of her arriving in Bosnia with absolutely zero danger. And her answer was, "Oh, I misspoke." Same thing with Tim Walz in an interview, and I don't have it up right now, but I can get it if I didn't last.
Well, it's interesting too, because I believe such a thing is what cost Brian Williams his anchorship in his career, was lying about being under fire in a war zone, which they found out to be false. But then these politicians get away with it with almost no repercussions.
Right. And I'm not a veteran, but I know some veterans, and they are not happy with this man whatsoever.
Which is sad, because the exaggeration in the lying, I mean, he did serve 24 years, which should have been considered honorable, but he decided to F it up. I mean, and the pathological lying from Walz is probably the most concerning. Even lying about having done IVF treatment, which CNN,
right?
Not Fox, but CNN fact-checked as false. So many of his statements and his biography, like the DUI, the stolen valor, etc., has just tended to be so, to be generous, exaggerated, and to be more accurate, just outright falsehoods. And yet he tries to pass himself as this, friendly football coach, which he's really not. And then on top of that, too,
he's not even a head coach. He was an assistant coach. He wasn't even a head coach
of the JV team too, not even the varsity.
Right.
And what's interesting is, he seems to, he talks about, there's an interview he gave with Harris where he tried to address his, his stolen valor. And he's like, me dumb man, me no speak good, effectively.
Right. Yeah,
and
yeah.
he
My
seems
wife
almost.
corrected me. And he also said I misspoke. The same thing Hillary said about the Bosnian sniper fire. I misspoke. It's apparently a get out of jail free card for liars.
But he seems to almost take pride in underachieving and failing. There's interviews he's given where he brags about how none of his kids will ever go to Ivy League schools, and no teacher should be talking about that. You should want to be more of a JD Vance, where you want your kids to go up from a trailer park to something successful. Correct. He seems to want them to stay, essentially as serfs working the field, because I guess now that he's governor, now he's Lord of the Manor, they make good little workers for him.
It's the actual American dream versus the faux American dream. And it's like you said earlier, people believe it because it's what they want to believe. And it's up to guys like you and me to break that pattern somehow. That debate's going to start in 3 minutes, so we should wrap it up. Tell us again about your. I'll put a link in the description, but tell us again real quickly about your. So
we're called the Make America Healthy Again PAC. Our website is www.maha.vote, and our focus is to make health front and center in our national policy and in our political discussions. Because for too long, we've allowed big corporations and corrupt government agencies to turn our bodies into profit centers, into the temple that it should be.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Prince, very much for sharing this hour with me. And I want to share the 8 people who are still watching for giving me an hour of your time. And anybody who watches the replay, it'll be on YouTube later. I'll put a link in the description. So it's MAHA.VOTE, no capitals, no nothings.
Capital doesn't matter, but yes. www.maha.vote. Yeah,
check it out, folks. Prince is a good man, and MAHA is a great movement, and clearly now I know MAHA doesn't end with this election, no matter what the result's going to be. Anyway, the Boomer has blathered. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Prince.
Thank you.